No one knew that a single glance in a quiet diner would set off a chain of events that would change their lives forever. Mia wiped the sweat from her forehead and tried to smile as she balanced a tray full of coffee cups. The small restaurant was busy that morning, filled with the smell of fried eggs and the sound of clinking dishes. She moved quickly between tables, greeting everyone with a soft good morning, even though she hadn't slept more than 5 hours. Her back ached, her feet hurt, and she was already thinking about the rent that was due next week, but she didn't let it show. Smiling was part of her job, and she needed every dollar she could earn. In the corner booth, a little boy sat with a pile of crayons and paper. That was her son Eli. His thin legs dangled from the chair, one foot wearing a small brace that helped him walk. He was 7 years old, full of energy and dreams. While other kids ran and played outside, Eli spent a lot of time drawing pictures of people dancing. He loved the way dancers moved, how music made them come alive. But Mia knew that dancing was something her boy could only watch for now. Every few minutes, she would glance over at him and smile. He would wave back, proudly showing her his latest drawing stick, figures twirling under colorful lights. That simple moment gave her strength. She often told herself that as long as Eli smiled, she could handle anything. The restaurant wasn't fancy. The wallpaper was peeling in places, and the old jukebox near the door didn't always work. People loved coming here because Mia made everyone feel welcome. She remembered names, how they liked their coffee, and even noticed when someone seemed sad. For the regulars, she was more than a waitress. She was a kind friend who always listened. Still, behind her gentle smile, was a woman carrying a mountain of worries. Hospital bills, physical therapy sessions, and school supplies all added up faster than her paycheck could cover. Her old car had broken down twice that month, and she'd used her savings to fix it. She sometimes skipped meals just to make sure Eli had enough. Yet, she never complained. She had learned long ago that life didn't always give second chances, so she made the best of what she had. On most days, the lunch rush was steady but quiet. That's when a man started coming in regularly. Man Mia didn't know, but quickly noticed. He always sat in the same corner table near the window, alone, reading something on his phone or scribbling notes on a pad. He was polite but quiet, dressed simply in a plain shirt and jeans. His name was Daniel Carter, though Mia didn't know that yet. To her, he was just the man with kind eyes. Daniel wasn't like her other customers. He didn't look at his phone the whole time or rush through his meal. He took his time, always tipping generously, and sometimes watching the people around him with a thoughtful expression. He especially noticed Mia, not because she was beautiful, though she was in a quiet, unpolished way, but because of how she moved through her day. He could tell she was tired, but her kindness never faded. Daniel had come to the small town to escape the world he once ruled. He was a billionaire, but money had lost its meaning after his wife died 2 years earlier. He had built companies, bought houses, and donated millions to charities, yet he felt empty. He wanted to be somewhere normal, somewhere quiet, where no one cared about his last name or his bank account. That's how he ended up in this little restaurant, sipping coffee and watching life go by. For a week straight, he came in every morning. Mia noticed, of course. But she didn't ask questions. She had learned not to pry into people's lives. Everyone came to the restaurant for their own reasons, some for food, others for company, and some just for silence. One afternoon, when the lunch crowd had thinned, Daniel watched as Mia brought Eli a small plate of fries. The boy's face lit up as he thanked her, his voice cheerful. Daniel could see how much they loved each other, the quiet, unspoken bond between a mother and her child. When Eli dropped one of his crayons, Mia bent down, picked it up, and kissed the top of his head. Daniel felt something stir inside him. It had been years since he'd seen that kind of pure love. As the days passed, he found himself timing his visits to when Mia worked. He didn't know why exactly. Maybe it was her warmth. Maybe the way she'd never treated him like someone special. To her, he was just another customer. That made him feel human again. One Friday evening, the restaurant was busier than usual. A local band was setting up near the corner, preparing for their small weekend show. People were laughing, couples were dancing, and the lights were dim and golden. Mia moved between tables with practiced grace, balancing trays and smiling at jokes she'd heard 100 times before. Eli sat near the jukebox, tapping his foot to the rhythm. Then the music started, a slow, happy tune. A few couples got up to dance. Eli's eyes widened. He turned to his mother, excitement sparkling in his face. "Mom, can I try to dance too?" asked. Softly, Mia froze for a second. She knew how much he wanted to dance, but she also knew how hard it was for him to keep his balance. People might stare. Someone might whisper. But then she looked into her son's eyes and saw pure hope. So she nodded. "Of course, baby," she said. She walked over, helped him stand, and held his hands gently. The music played on. Eli took a small step forward, then another, his crutch tapping against the floor. Mia followed his lead, matching his slow, uneven rhythm. At first, people turned to look curious. Then, when they realized what was happening, the room fell silent. All they could see was a brave little boy and his mother dancing together like no one else existed. Daniel watched from his usual seat, his chest tightening. It wasn't sadness he felt, it was admiration. The world was full of people who gave up when life became hard. But here was a woman who refused to break, who smiled through pain, and a child who believed he could dance even when his body said otherwise. As the song ended, someone in the crowd began to clap. Soon everyone joined in. Eli laughed, out of breath but glowing with pride. Mia hugged him tight, whispering, "You did it, sweetheart." Daniel couldn't take his eyes off them. Something inside him shifted, like a door opening after years of being locked. For the first time in a long while, he felt warmth real, human warmth. He didn't know it yet, but that small moment would change all three of their lives forever. When Mia tucked Eli into bed that night, he was still smiling. "Mom," he said sleepily, "did you see them clap for me?" "I did," she whispered, brushing his hair from his forehead. "You were amazing." He nodded proudly and drifted off to sleep. Mia sat beside him for a long time, her hand resting on his blanket, tears filling her eyes. They weren't tears of sadness, but of love and exhaustion mixed together. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she promised herself she'd keep fighting for him, no matter how hard it got. Across town, Daniel sat alone in his rented house, staring out at the dark sea. He kept replaying that moment the way the little boy had danced, the way the mother had smiled through her tears. He'd spent years building empires, chasing success, yet he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt moved by something so simple. That night, he made a quiet decision. He didn't know how yet, but he wanted to do something for them, not out of pity, but out of respect. The woman and her son had reminded him that kindness and courage still existed. And for the first time in years, Daniel Carter felt a spark of purpose return to his life. The next few days passed quietly in the little restaurant. Mia kept working double shifts, moving from table to table with her usual smile. But something about that night when Eli danced stayed in her mind. Every time she thought of the way the crowd had clapped for him, her heart warmed. It had been so long since she had seen her son that happy. Eli talked about it nonstop. On the way to school, while doing homework, even before bed, he would say, "Mom, did you see how I danced?" Mia always laughed and said yes, pretending she didn't feel the ache in her chest. She wished life could always be like that music, laughter, and no worries about bills or broken cars. That morning, as she served breakfast, she noticed the man from the corner table again. He was there early, sipping his coffee and reading something on his phone. He looked up when she came over. "Good morning," he said kindly. "Good morning," Mia replied, trying not to sound too tired. She refilled his cup and gave a polite smile. "The usual breakfast?" He nodded. "Please. And how's your boy?" He looked like he was having fun the other night. And Mia stopped for a second, surprised that he remembered. Oh, yes, he was. He's still talking about it. "That was a beautiful moment," the man said softly. "You made him feel brave." Mia smiled awkwardly. "He's already brave. I just try to keep up." She didn't realize her words had touched him more than she could imagine. When she walked away, Daniel Carter watched her with quiet respect. Her kindness wasn't for show, came naturally. He'd met thousands of people in his life, powerful, rich, talented, but none had her warmth. She reminded him of his late wife, who used to say, "Kindness is the only real wealth." Later that day, the sky darkened, and rain started to fall. The restaurant glowed warmly from the inside as people came in for dinner, shaking umbrellas and laughing at the storm. The sound of rain on the windows mixed with the clinking of glasses. Eli sat in his favorite corner, drawing another picture. He had drawn 2 stick figures holding hands and dancing. Under a big yellow moon, when the small local band began setting up again, Mia sighed softly. She liked when they played. It made the place feel alive. Tonight, they were performing soft jazz and old love songs. The customers were excited. A few couples had already cleared some space near the counter for dancing. Daniel came in late that evening, just as the music started. He had been thinking all day about Mia and Eli, about how such ordinary people could carry so much strength. He took his seat quietly and ordered a coffee. He didn't want to intrude, he just wanted to see them again. The band started playing a slow, cheerful tune. A few people got up and began to dance. Eli looked up from his drawing, his face lighting up. He turned toward his mom, who was carrying a tray of drinks. "Mom," he called softly, "can I dance again?" Mia hesitated. There were more people this time. She didn't want him to feel embarrassed or fall, but his eyes were full of excitement, and she couldn't say no. "Okay," she said gently, setting the tray down. "Just take it slow." The boy grabbed his small crutch and limped to the open space. The crowd noticed him. Some smiled. Others turned curiously. The music played on, and Eli looked up at his mother with a grin. "You dance too, Mom." Mia felt her cheeks turn red, but she laughed and joined him. She bent slightly, holding both his hands. Together, they began to move. It wasn't a real dance, just small steps, side to side, his crutch tapping in rhythm. But there was something magical about it. Daniel felt a lump form in his throat. He had seen performances worth millions. Ballroom dancers on grand stages, but none of it compared to this little boy dancing with his mother in a small-town restaurant. He could feel everyone else noticing too. The chatter faded until the only sound left was the music and the soft tapping of Eli's crutch. Mia looked at her son's face, shining with pride, and forgot about everything else. She didn't care who was watching. For a few minutes, there were no bills, no exhaustion, no broken car. There was only her boy and the music. When the song ended, the restaurant was silent for a moment. Then, one by one, people began to clap. Eli looked around, surprised, and his face broke into the biggest smile Mia had ever seen. Someone shouted, "Encore!" and the band laughed and played a faster tune. Eli giggled and tried to follow it, taking another small step. Mia twirled him slowly, careful not to let him fall. The crowd clapped again, louder this time. When the music stopped for good, Eli was breathing hard, but grinning. "Mom, did you see? I didn't even trip," he said proudly. "You were amazing," she whispered, hugging him tight. She felt tears in her eyes, but quickly blinked them away. Daniel couldn't sit still any longer. He walked to the counter and caught Mia's attention as she carried Eli back to their booth. "He's a great dancer," Daniel said softly. Mia smiled, still catching her breath. "He thinks so too. May I buy him a slice of pie?" he asked kindly. She hesitated. "You don't have to do that." "I know," he replied. "I'd like to." A few minutes later, Eli was eating his favorite apple pie with a scoop of vanilla ice cream. He looked up at Daniel with wide, curious eyes. "Are you a dancer too?" he asked. Daniel chuckled. "Not as good as you." Eli laughed and said, "Mom says anyone can dance if they feel the music." Daniel smiled at that. He looked at Mia, who was watching her son fondly, and said quietly, "She's right." As the rain kept falling outside, the three of them talked for a few minutes. It wasn't anything deep, just small, ordinary things. Daniel learned that Eli loved cartoons and dogs, and that Mia worked 6 days a week. He noticed how her eyes dimmed when she talked about Eli's therapy costs, though she tried to hide it. When Daniel finally stood to leave, he said, "Thank you for letting me sit here. That was special." Mia smiled politely. "Thank you for coming. Good night." He walked out into the rain, but his mind was still in the restaurant. That little boy's dance had touched something inside him that he thought was gone forever. It reminded him of when his wife used to dance barefoot in their living room, laughing, before illness took her away. For the first time in years, the memory didn't hurt it, made him feel alive again. Inside the restaurant, Mia helped Eli put on his jacket. "You made a new friend," she said teasingly. "He's nice," Eli replied. He didn't laugh at me. "No one's laughing, sweetheart," she said, kissing the top of his head. "Everyone's proud of you." On their drive home, the rain had slowed. Eli leaned against the window, humming the song they'd danced to. Mia kept glancing at him through the rearview mirror, her heart full. The night had been simple, but it felt like something had changed. Across town, Daniel sat in his rented cottage by the sea, still thinking about them. He poured himself a cup of tea and stared at the dark waves. All his life, he had been surrounded by people who wanted something from him: money, power, favors. But tonight, he had met someone who didn't want anything. A woman who worked hard, who smiled even when life was unfair, who loved her son more than anything. He felt a strange pull, a quiet voice inside saying he needed to do something. Not because he felt sorry for them, but because they had given him something priceless without realizing it. They had reminded him what kindness looked like. That night, he opened his laptop and began searching. He typed in words like dance therapy for disabled children and mobility support for kids. He didn't know exactly what he was going to do yet, but he knew one thing for sure: he wanted to help Eli and his mother. The rain finally stopped. Daniel looked out the window at the wet streets shining under the lamplight. Somewhere across town, that little boy was probably asleep, dreaming about dancing again. And Daniel Carter, the man who thought he had everything, realized that maybe, for the first time in a long while, he had found something real. The next morning, the restaurant was quiet, and sunlight spilled through the dusty windows. Mia moved around slowly, wiping tables and humming softly to herself. It had been a long week, but she felt lighter somehow. Maybe it was because Eli had been happier than usual lately. Ever since that dance night, his confidence had grown. He practiced small steps at home, using the music from the radio and pretending the kitchen floor was a big stage. When Daniel walked in that morning, Mia greeted him with a real smile this time, not just her usual polite one. He noticed the difference immediately. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. "The usual coffee?" "Yes, please," Daniel replied, returning her smile. He had been thinking about her and Eli all night, wondering how he could help without making them uncomfortable. He knew from experience that people didn't always accept help easily, especially those who had learned to survive on their own. He watched as she moved between tables, quick but graceful, her hair tied loosely, her hands never still. She talked kindly to every customer, even the rude ones. There was something rare about her. He could see that she was exhausted, but she never let it show for long. When she finally brought his breakfast, he decided to start a real conversation. "You know," he said, "I don't think I've ever seen anyone handle this place as well as you do." Mia laughed softly. "Well, it's not too hard when you've been doing it for years. The secret is lots of coffee and pretending you're not tired." Daniel smiled. "You must love it here." She shrugged. "It's not bad. It's honest work. The people are nice. My boss lets me bring Eli when I don't have anyone to watch him, so I'm lucky for that." He nodded slowly. "And your son, how's he doing? He seemed very happy the other night." Mia's face softened instantly. "He's doing better. He has therapy twice a week, and he's been trying to walk without help more often. He gets frustrated sometimes, but he doesn't give up." Daniel listened carefully. "That's brave of him." She looked at him thoughtfully. "He is brave. More than me, I think. Kids don't worry about what people think. They just try. Adults forget how to do that." Daniel liked how she talked, not like someone complaining about life, but like someone who had made peace with it. When she went back to work, he took out his phone and opened his foundation's website. He had started it years ago to help children's hospitals, but it had been quiet since his wife passed away. He'd lost motivation, lost the feeling that his work mattered. Now, for the first time, he felt a spark of purpose return. That afternoon, he made some phone calls. He talked to one of his managers in the city. "I want you to find out everything you can about children's therapy programs," he said, "especially ones that use music or dance for mobility training." His manager sounded surprised. "Yes, of course, Mr. Carter. Should I ask if you're interested in donating?" "Not yet," Daniel replied. "Just gather information." Quietly. When he hung up, he sat back and thought about the restaurant. The place had charm, but it was clearly struggling. The building was old, and the owner, a kind man named Mr. Jenkins, had mentioned once that he was planning to retire soon. Daniel remembered that. If the restaurant closed, Mia would lose her job, and Eli would lose his little world of safety and laughter. He decided to ask around. That evening, he stopped by just as the dinner crowd was thinning. Mr. Jenkins was sitting near the counter, counting the day's earnings. Daniel walked over and struck up a conversation. "You've got a nice place here," he said casually, Mr. Jenkins chuckled. "Thanks. Been running it for 30 years, but I'm getting too old for the late nights. Thinking of selling soon, if anyone's crazy enough to buy a diner." Daniel's eyes narrowed slightly. "Really? You plan to close it?" "Only if I can't find the right person to take over," Mr. Jenkins said with a sigh. "I don't want someone turning it into a chain or changing everything. This place has soul. People like Mia keep it alive." Daniel nodded. "She's special," he said quietly. Mr. Jenkins smiled. "That she is. Tough as nails, but kind. Her little boy's sweet kid. She deserves more than this job, but she never complains. I'd help her if I could, but I'm barely keeping this place open myself." Daniel left that night with a plan forming in his mind. He didn't want to just help them temporarily. He wanted to change their lives permanently, but in a way that didn't make them feel small. He knew what pity looked like, and he didn't want Mia to feel it from him. The next morning, he came in again. Mia greeted him warmly. "You really like our coffee, huh?" she teased. "It's not bad," he said, smiling. "But I think it's the company that keeps bringing me back." She blushed lightly and rolled her eyes. "Flattery won't get you free refills." They both laughed. For a moment it felt like they were just two ordinary people, sharing a friendly morning. When she went to serve another table, Daniel noticed Eli sitting quietly with his coloring book. He went over and crouched down beside him. "Hey, champ," he said. "What are you drawing today?" Eli looked up, beaming. "A dance floor. Mom says maybe one day I can dance in a big hall with lights." "That sounds amazing," Daniel said. "And I think you will. You've got more courage than most grown-ups, I know." Eli giggled. "Even you." Daniel smiled. "Especially me." That afternoon, Daniel drove out of town to meet a few people from his foundation. They discussed dance therapy programs, mobility equipment, and scholarships for disabled children. The more he learned, the more determined he became. He could easily fund Eli's therapy for years, but he wanted to do more. He wanted to create something that would keep helping kids like him. Long after this story was forgotten, by the time he returned to the restaurant, it was nearly closing. Mia was wiping tables, her hands red from cleaning. Daniel approached quietly. "You must be exhausted," he said. "Always," she replied with a small smile. "But it's okay. I like staying busy. If I stop, I'll start thinking too much." He hesitated before asking, "If you could do anything at all, what would you do?" She laughed softly. "You mean if money wasn't a problem?" "Exactly." She leaned on the table, thinking. "I'd probably open my own cafe. Something small, cozy, a place where people feel at home. And maybe I'd have space for kids like Eli to hang out, so they don't feel different. But that's just a dream." "Dreams are free, right?" Daniel nodded slowly, his mind already racing. "Dreams are the best things to invest in," he said quietly. She smiled, but didn't take his words too seriously. To her, he was just a kind stranger making conversation. She had no idea he was planning something far bigger than she could imagine. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, staring at the moonlit waves. He thought about the loneliness that had filled his life since his wife's death, how empty his success had felt. For years he'd been searching for meaning again, and somehow he'd found it in a small restaurant with a tired waitress and her brave little boy. He picked up his phone and called his assistant again. "I need you to prepare a business proposal," he said. "A purchase contract for a restaurant property." Quietly. No publicity. "Understood, sir." "Whose name should we use?" "Not mine," Daniel said. "Use the foundation's. And also, reach out to the Children's Hospital. Tell them we're funding a new program for dance and movement therapy. I'll handle the rest personally." When he hung up, he smiled faintly for the first time in years. He didn't know how Mia would react when she learned the truth, but he hoped she would understand. He wasn't trying to rescue her. He was trying to give back what life had taken from him: hope, connection, and purpose. In the small apartment across town, Mia tucked Eli into bed. "Did you have fun today?" she asked softly. "Yeah," Eli murmured sleepily. Mr. Daniel said, "I'm brave." "You are," she whispered, brushing his hair from his forehead. When she turned off the light, she thought about the kind stranger who kept coming back, who spoke to her with respect instead of pity. She didn't know who he really was or what was going on in his mind, but something about him felt different. Like he carried a story too heavy for words. Both of them fell asleep that night, one dreaming of dancing, the other dreaming of how to change someone else's world. Neither knew that their lives were already beginning to intertwine in ways they couldn't yet see. A few days later, Mia was wiping down the restaurant counter when Daniel walked in again, but this time he looked different. He was dressed a little more formally in a clean white shirt and dark jacket, and there was something serious in his eyes. She greeted him with her usual warm smile, but she could tell something was on his mind. "Morning," she said cheerfully, trying to hide the tiredness in her voice. "You're early today. Coffee?" He nodded. "Yes, please." "And I was hoping to ask you something." She raised an eyebrow. "Ask me something. That sounds mysterious." He smiled slightly, but there was a hint of nervousness in it. "There's a local charity gala this weekend. It's for children's health programs. They're looking for help with catering and setup, and I thought of you. You're great at what you do, and it might be a nice opportunity." Mia hesitated. "A gala. I don't think I belong at something fancy like that. Besides, I've never done catering that big." Daniel shook his head gently. "You'll be perfect. It's not as formal as it sounds, I promise. And if it helps, you can bring Eli too. There'll be other kids there." She frowned slightly. "Are you sure? It sounds important. I wouldn't want to mess it up." He met her eyes. "Trust me, you won't." After a long pause, she finally nodded. "All right, I'll do it. But only because Eli will be thrilled to go somewhere new." When she told her son about the event, he was over the moon. "A party? With music?" he asked excitedly. "Can I dance again?" Mia laughed. "Maybe, but remember, we're there to help." For the next few days, she worked hard preparing. She borrowed a simple black dress from her friend, one she hadn't worn in years. She cleaned Eli's little shoes, made sure his brace was secure, and reminded herself not to overthink. Still, she couldn't help but wonder why Daniel was being so kind. He was always polite and generous. This felt different, almost too generous. Saturday evening came. The gala was held at a beautiful old hotel near the ocean. The ballroom glowed with golden lights, filled with people in elegant clothes, soft music playing in the background. Mia felt nervous as soon as she stepped inside. She had never been to a place like this before. She kept close to Eli, who was staring wide-eyed at everything around him. Daniel appeared from across the room and walked toward them. For the first time, Mia saw him surrounded by other well-dressed people who greeted him respectfully. He seemed confident, at ease, like he belonged in this world. She suddenly realized she didn't know anything about his life outside the restaurant. He smiled when he reached them. "You both look wonderful," he said warmly. Mia blushed slightly. "Thank you. This place is beautiful." "Are you sure we're supposed to be here?" He chuckled softly. You're exactly where you should be. Before she could ask what he meant, someone from the event staff came up to Daniel. Mr. Carter, we're ready for your speech, the man said. Mia froze. Mr. Carter? The name echoed in her mind. She had heard it before on the news, in magazines. Daniel Carter. Wasn't he the billionaire philanthropist who owned a global tech company and donated to children's hospitals? Her stomach flipped. She looked at him in shock. Daniel noticed the change in her expression. He gave a small, apologetic smile. I was going to tell you, he said quietly, but I didn't want you to see me differently. She couldn't find words. Her hands tightened around Eli's. You're that Daniel Carter? She whispered. He nodded. Yes, but I'm still the same man who comes for coffee and watches your son draw. I just wanted to do something that mattered again. Before she could respond, he stepped onto the stage. The room fell silent. The spotlight shone on him as he began to speak. His voice was calm, but full of feeling. Good evening, everyone. Tonight's event is about hope, about the small moments that remind us why we care. A few weeks ago, I met a young boy who changed the way I see the world. He has a brave heart and a mother whose strength and kindness reminded me what true courage looks like. Mia's heart pounded. People turned their heads, looking for who he was talking about. Eli squeezed her hand, smiling proudly. Daniel continued, That little boy inspired a new program we're launching tonight, a foundation that will fund therapy, creative arts, and opportunities for children with disabilities. It's called Steps of Hope, and the idea came from a simple moment, a child who dared to dance, and a mother who believed in him. The crowd began to applaud. Mia's eyes filled with tears as she realized what he had done. He wasn't just helping her son, he was helping so many others like him. Daniel then looked toward them. Eli, he said softly into the microphone, would you help me open the dance floor tonight? The room erupted into gentle applause. Eli's eyes went wide. Mom, he whispered. He wants me to dance. Mia was speechless, tears streaming down her face. Go ahead, sweetheart, she said softly. You can do it. Daniel stepped down from the stage and held out his hand. Eli grinned and limped toward him, his crutch tapping softly against the floor. The band started to play a slow, sweet tune. Daniel knelt, so he was at Eli's level, and whispered something in his ear. Then, slowly, Eli took his first steps onto the dance floor. At first it was quiet. Everyone watched as the little boy moved carefully, guided by Daniel. Then Mia joined them, smiling through her tears, and took Eli's other hand. Together, the three of them began to move in small, gentle steps. The room was silent except for the music. By the time the song ended, the entire crowd was standing, clapping, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Cameras flashed, but Daniel ignored them. He was watching Eli laugh and spin slowly, his face glowing with joy. Mia felt like her heart might burst. It was too much, too kind, too unbelievable. When the applause died down, Daniel leaned toward her. Now you see why I wanted you here, he said quietly. She could barely speak. You didn't have to do all this, she whispered. I wanted to, he said simply. You and your son reminded me what real happiness looks like. You gave me back something I thought I'd lost. After the dance, people came up to congratulate Eli, to shake Mia's hand, to thank Daniel for his generosity. Mia felt overwhelmed by all the attention. She wasn't used to being noticed, and she didn't know how to react. Later that evening, Daniel found her standing near the window, looking out at the ocean. The moonlight reflected off the water, and she looked calm but lost in thought. You okay? He asked gently. She turned toward him. I don't understand why you do all this for us, she said softly. You're someone important. You didn't have to notice us. He shook his head. You're wrong. I needed to notice you. I had everything, money, success, but I forgot what real life looked like. Then I walked into that restaurant and saw how much love you gave your son even when you had nothing to spare. That's real strength. You reminded me what matters. Mia's eyes glistened. You really think we inspired you? I know you did, he said firmly. She smiled shyly. Then I'm glad you walked into our little diner. Daniel looked at her and smiled. Me too. As the night went on, the music grew louder, and people began to dance again. Eli sat happily with a group of children, eating cake and telling stories about his big dance. Mia stood beside Daniel, watching him interact with the guests. She could see now that behind the billionaire title was a man with a kind, lonely heart. When the event ended, he walked them to their car. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, "and for saying yes." Mia nodded. "Thank you for everything. I don't think I'll ever forget this night." Eli waved from the back seat. "Bye, Mr. Daniel. Next time we dance, I'll teach you new steps." Daniel laughed. "I'll be ready." As they drove away, he stood watching their car disappear into the distance. For the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. He knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something meaningful, and somewhere inside her old car. As the lights of the city faded behind them, Mia looked at her son in the rearview mirror and whispered to herself, "Some people are meant to cross your path just once to change your whole life." She didn't yet know how much more Daniel was about to do for them, but deep down, she already felt that her world had shifted forever. Weeks passed since the gala, and life began to change for Mia and Eli in ways they could have never imagined. At first, things seemed small and ordinary. The restaurant was still busy, and Mia continued her long shifts. But there was a difference now. She noticed it the moment she walked in each morning. The smiles from the regulars were warmer. The customers lingered longer, and even the small pile of bills on her counter didn't seem quite as heavy. One morning, Daniel walked in with a quiet determination in his steps. Mia greeted him, her usual polite smile ready, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Good morning," she said. "You seem serious today." Daniel returned her smile gently. "I have something to show you. Something I think you'll like." She raised an eyebrow, unsure. "Oh, and what's that?" He gestured toward the back of the restaurant. "Follow me." Mia glanced at Eli, who was sitting in his favorite corner with his coloring book. "Wait here, sweetie," she whispered. Then she followed Daniel to the kitchen doorway. Before her eyes was a small, neat stack of papers and a set of keys. Daniel handed them to her carefully. "Mia, I bought the restaurant," he said simply. Mia's hand froze on the keys. "You... what?" Daniel chuckled softly. "I didn't want to surprise you like this in front of the customers. I wanted to wait until we were alone. The restaurant is yours now if you want it." Mia felt her chest tighten. Her mind raced. Own the restaurant. She had dreamed of running a place like this, but she never thought it could be possible. She looked down at the keys, then back at him. "But why? You don't even know me. I'm just a waitress." "You're more than that," he said. "You've built something special here. People love this place because of you. And your son deserves stability. I want to help you make that happen." Tears welled in Mia's eyes. She didn't know what to say. After everything she had been through, working endless hours, worrying about money, struggling to make ends meet, this felt like a miracle. I don't know what to say," she whispered. "Then don't say anything," Daniel replied gently. "Just promise me you'll keep running this place the way you do. Make it a home for people, like it's always been." Mia nodded slowly, unable to stop the tears from falling. She hugged the keys to her chest. "I promise," she said quietly. The first few days after the news, Mia felt like she was walking in a dream. She was still doing her shifts, still serving coffee and eggs, but now it was different. Everything she did felt like it mattered more. She could make small improvements to the restaurant, fixing the worn-out chairs, painting the walls, buying fresh flowers for the tables, without worrying about money. And Eli noticed too. One afternoon, while Mia was wiping a table, Eli ran over to her, waving a small flyer. "Mom, look, dance class for kids. And they have a new therapy program too." Mia smiled, taking the flyer. "That's wonderful, Eli. Maybe we can sign you up." Eli's eyes lit up. "Really? I can go?" "Yes, sweetie. You can try anything you want," she said, feeling her heart swell with pride. Daniel had also ensured that Eli's therapy was fully funded. Every session, every specialized lesson, every dance class he wanted to try, He could do it without Mia worrying about the cost. For the first time, she felt like her son had a real chance to grow freely. Without limits, the restaurant's reopening, now officially under Mia's ownership, became a small celebration in the town. Daniel had arranged it quietly, without fanfare, but the regulars were thrilled. They decorated the place with fresh flowers and balloons, congratulating Mia on this new chapter in her life. She moved through the crowd, overwhelmed with gratitude, but also filled with determination. This restaurant was now hers, and she wanted to make it better than ever, not just for her, but for everyone who walked through the doors. Eli, of course, had a special role that evening. The band from the gala came to play a few songs, and Mia encouraged Eli to lead a small dance for the neighborhood children. He stood at the center, his crutch tapping gently, and slowly guided the other kids. His confidence had grown tremendously since that first dance. He smiled widely, spinning carefully with a little girl. Then hopping lightly to the rhythm of the music, Mia watched from the counter, tears in her eyes. Daniel stood beside her, smiling quietly. "He's incredible," he whispered. "He is," she said softly. "I never knew he could be this brave." Daniel shook his head. "He always had it in him. You just gave him the chance." Over the next few months, the restaurant became more than just a place to eat. Mia introduced small events, family nights, kids' activities, and even music evenings where children could practice dancing. It became a community hub, and people loved it. Daniel visited often, sometimes quietly observing. Sometimes helping behind the counter, never asking for recognition. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the windows, Mia found herself talking with Daniel alone. "You really didn't have to do all of this," she said. "I know," he replied, smiling. "But you reminded me that helping someone can bring more happiness than anything money can buy. I wanted to give you both a better life, not because I had to, but because I wanted to." Mia shook her head, tears forming again. "You changed everything. You gave us hope when we didn't think there was any." Daniel looked at her sincerely. "You gave me hope too. I lost a lot in my life, but seeing how you and Eli faced the world, it reminded me what really matters." From that day on, life settled into a new rhythm. Mia managed the restaurant with pride, her confidence growing each day. Eli flourished in his therapy and dance classes. He could walk longer distances, balance better, and even attempt small spins on his own. The boys' laughter filled their home and the restaurant alike. Daniel continued to be a quiet presence in their lives, offering support when needed but never intruding. Mia came to realize that his presence wasn't just about money or assistance, it was about friendship and trust. He had shown them that kindness could be genuine, that people could care without expecting anything in return. Months later, on a warm Saturday evening, the restaurant hosted its first large community dance event. Families gathered, children ran around laughing, and music filled the air. Eli, now brimming with confidence, led a group of children through a series of simple dance steps. Mia watched him, her heart swelling with pride. She thought back to the first night he had danced in the restaurant, unsure and nervous, and now saw him leading others, happy and fearless. Daniel stood quietly to the side, smiling. He didn't need applause or recognition. Seeing Mia and Eli thrive was enough. The little boy, once shy and uncertain, was now full of life and courage. And the mother who had struggled endlessly now had the security and hope she deserved. As the night wound down, Mia stood by the counter, exhausted but joyful. She looked at Eli, who was laughing with friends, and at Daniel, who gave her a small, understanding nod. She realized how much their lives had changed. A simple act of kindness, a moment of belief in a child, and the courage to help had transformed everything. Mia knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not because life was perfect, there would still be hard days, challenges, and worries, but because she had discovered that love, kindness, and opportunity could truly change lives. And she had seen firsthand how one person's compassion could ripple out to create a brighter, stronger world for Mia, Eli, and Daniel. Life was no longer about surviving. It was about living fully, embracing joy, and sharing that joy with others. Their paths had crossed in a way that seemed unlikely, almost magical, but it had led to something lasting. Mia felt grateful every day, not just for the help, but for the reminder that hope and courage could always be found. Even in the smallest of moments, Eli danced freely that evening, spinning and laughing under the warm lights, and Mia watched, tears of happiness streaming down her face. She whispered softly, "We did it, Eli. We're really doing it." And for Daniel, seeing them both happy and thriving was more rewarding than any business deal, any award, or any achievement he had ever earned. He had changed their lives, but in return, they had changed his Tori, minding him of the power of kindness, hope, and love. That night, the little restaurant glowed with music, laughter, and warmth. A mother, her son, and a man who believed in them all shared a simple truth: that life could be extraordinary when people believed in each other, and that a single act of kindness could change a life forever.